Hello, everyone. My name is Chris DeBona. I help out Cliff sometimes with the Authors at Google program. Today we have John Scalzi here to talk to us about
Lock-in.
book things.
Yeah, book things.
Book things. Next week we have some really terrific guests too, but this week is John.
Right.
So
I'm here all week.
Yes.
Try the veal.
Try the veal. You might remember John from his time as an AOL employee,
Right.
writing for an AOL subsite.
Right.
Which
It
one
was
was
a
it?
little humor area called Howdy. You click on
/Howdy.
Yeah, you would click. Actually, you would click on the triangle when you signed into AOL at your lightning fast 28K baud. Yeah, and you click on that, and it would pop up a cartoon or an essay or something like that.
So the interface, the gateway was like a triangle.
Yeah, the gateway was.
And
a
everyone
triangle.
knew that the triangle meant funny.
Right. That's exactly how it works.
This is how the internet was before the internet, just for the record.
Good times. Good times.
You didn't have your own Go link.
No.
On the
Well,
system.
no, I did. I did. You go
Howdy.
go Scalzi.
Go Scalzi.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Worked.
So
Good Howdy.
it's not the end of the world if I tell the world this. So our internal system, all the time we're telling people to go /here, go
Yep.
/there. And so you were go /Scalzi live.
Right.
Was the link for this particular talk. I'm going to get off the stage and let you start. What we're going to do is John's going to speak about some of his vaunted works of literature. And then we'll be taking some Q&A.
Right.
So you'll have ample time to ask some questions. And then we'll have a signing in the back. So
Sounds good.
there you go. And
All right.
so everyone, John Scalzi.
One, thank you for having me. The last time I was here is 2007 when The Last Colony was coming out. And as Chris mentioned at the time, my publisher was suing Google. So that wasn't awkward at all. But now I think things have been reasonably well settled, and I think we'll be moving on just fine. And I have to say, again, it's always a lot of fun for me to come back to Google, because he was mentioning that I was at AOL when AOL was Google, back in the 1990s. So every once in a while, I come around to the campus and, with all the cafes and the pet care and the, masseuses and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, all I'm missing is Third Eye Blind, and it would be just like I was there again. So I can understand if that doesn't go over particularly well here, because you guys remember what happened to AOL. Not going to happen to you. Totally not going to happen. One of the new book that I have out is called Lock-in. This is the book, which obviously quite a few of you have. I'm going to read a little bit from it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it before I do the reading, which is that, as you know, technology is a really interesting thing. And you can do many things with technology, and some of them can be awesome, and some of them can be troublesome. You experience it even with like some of the Google products that you have. In one sense, there are people who love, that the fact that like I can go to Google Earth or Google Maps and actually find a picture of my house. And I think that's really awesome. I also think that Google needs to go and redo it, because the picture you took, my lawn is yellow because it was like early March, and my trash can is tipped over in front of my house. This is not how I want the world to see my house. So please, Google Maps, go fix that. But some people think it's awesome. On the other hand, there are some people who feel that, all this is somehow an invasion of privacy. I think in Europe, they had some people who's like, there are some places where they don't want you to map or something like that. The folks over here with Google Glass, in one sense, it's awesome that, you can, walk around and actually have that stuff without having your phone directly in front of you and therefore walking into trees. On the other hand, there are some people who are like, will you please turn those things off, because they don't know if you are running the pictures live or not. So there's always that back and forth about what technology is and how we integrate it into our lives. And it's really interesting to me, quite frankly, just how quickly you get used to how technology just is integral to your life. Like, my Google phone here from Motorola, which you dearly departed. And so the thing that is awesome about this piece of technology is not that I can talk to it and say, hey, Google now, and turn that off, and have it respond, and I will ask it a question and it will give me an answer. What is awesome is that I can say, hey, Google now, and ask it a question and give me an answer. And if it gets it wrong, I get annoyed, right? And what that means is why that's so cool is that I'm so used to this being an integral part of my life, of living in the future, of having the entire world at my doorstep, that frankly, when the technology does not work the way it's supposed to, that I can get annoyed. That the wonder of all this technology, the wonder of everything that science has wrought and that you guys work on a day in, day out basis will just piss me off when it's not working exactly the way it's supposed to. That means we are living in the future because it is just part of our everyday lives. And lock-in is about that. What happens is that the day after tomorrow, as they say, there is a new disease that sweeps around the world. And so let's say everybody in this room gets sick with this disease. First, it's like a flu. So you all get sick, right? About, let's say, everybody but the first 3 rows here gets better. You get sick, you get better, it's the flu. Not a problem. But these folks in the first 3 rows, you get to the second phase of the disease, and what that is like viral meningitis, in which your brain swells up and it's really painful, and then some of you drop dead. Let's say those folks, sorry you're dead, and these folks are still alive. And of these folks who are still alive, there is a third stage, which is called lock-in. And lock-in means that your entire autonomic service system breaks down. Your brain is still functioning, but you are not able to do anything. You are literally locked inside of your body. And so it's about 1% of the people. So you are locked in. Sorry, Chris. And so in one sort of sense, it doesn't seem like that many people all together. But if it's these two in a room of 200 people, replicated all across the country, that ends up being 1% of the population, maybe like at the time, let's say about 4.35 million people, which is the city of Los Angeles or the state of Connecticut. And then all of a sudden it becomes this huge public health crisis, and how do we solve it? How do we get them out of their minds, so to speak, in a very literal sense? And the answer is, and this is something that folks here at Google would know, is you throw technology at it, and also a lot of money. And so there's this research initiative that includes brain prostheses, neural networks within your brain, integrating with your brain, a multiple online place for the people who are locked in to have some semblance of conversation amongst each other, and then these things called threeps, which are named after C-3PO, that they are basically androids that they drive around with their brains. So Chris is locked in. But he will have this really cool-looking, android, ironically enough, and he will, wander around and do all his stuff that he does in the android while his body is at home being tended to. And the thing is when it first happens, of course, it's the most amazing thing. We have turned you into an android. 25 years on, which is when this happens, nobody cares that you're an android anymore. You're just part of it's part of the world. 1% of everybody in the world is an android. And how do you deal with that? And where do you go from there? So that was interesting to me. The thing that interests me about technology is not how awesome the technology is. It is what happens after the awesome wears out. When it just becomes part of your day-to-day life, and you deal with this stuff, and it's not that big of a deal. And the most, the most that you think about your technology is when it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And to give an idea of kind of what that would be like to be someone who is dealing with this stuff, I'm going to read a quick chapter from chapter 5, where our protagonist, Chris Shane, is looking for an apartment. Chris is someone who is a Hayden, who is one of these people who is locked in. And so when Chris is looking for someplace, it has to be someplace that actually caters to the needs of someone who is locked in. So I'm going to go ahead and read from that. And just so you know, Chris is part of a famous family. So Chris would be very much like someone who is like a child star at one point and stops being that child star and tries to have a normal life. And right now, Chris works for the FBI. First couple days on the job, he's trying to get a new apartment in D.C. Okay. The realtor was a small, elegant woman named Latasha Robinson, and she met me directly outside the Bureau building. One of her realty specialties was the Hayden market, so the Bureau connected me with her to help me find an apartment. Given her clientele, the chances that she might not know who I was were close to nil, a suspicion that was verified as I approached. She smiled a smile I recognized from years of being trotted out as the official Hayden's poster child, part of the official Hayden's poster family. I didn't hold it against her. "Agent Shane," she said, holding out her hand, "really lovely to meet you." I took the hand and shook it. "Ms. Robinson, likewise." "I'm sorry, this is just kind of exciting," she said. "I don't meet that many famous people. I mean, who aren't politicians." This takes place in D.C. "Not in this town, no," I agreed. "And I don't think of politicians as being famous, do you? They're just politicians." I couldn't agree more. "My car's right over here," she said, pointing to a relatively unflashy Cadillac parked where it would get ticketed. "Why don't we get started?" I got into the passenger side. Robinson got into the driver's seat and pulled out her tablet. "Amble," she said, and the car slid out from the curb. Just ahead, I noted as I glanced in the rearview mirror, of a traffic cop. We headed east on Pennsylvania Avenue. "The car's just going to drive around for a few minutes while we get set up here," Robinson said, tapping her tablet. For all her gushing a few seconds before, she slipped into business mode pretty quickly. "I've got your basic request list and personal information." She looked over as if to acknowledge that I was, in fact, a Hayden, and she knew it. "So let's get a few things narrowed down before we start." "All right," I said. "So how close do you want to be to work?" "Closer is better." "Are we talking walking close or metro line close?" "Metro line close is fine," I said. "Do you prefer a neighborhood that's hip or one that's quiet?" "It doesn't really matter to me." "You say that now, but if I get you an apartment over a bar in Adams Morgan and you hate it, you're going to blame me," Robinson said, looking over at me. "I promise noise isn't going to bother me," I said. "I can turn down my hearing." "Do you plan on using the apartment to socialize?" "Not really," I said. "I do most of my socializing elsewhere. I might have a friend over from time to time." Robinson looked over again at this and seemed to be considering whether to ask for clarification and decided against it. It was a fair call. There were threep fetishists out there. They weren't really my thing, I have to say. "Will your body be physically present, and if so, will you need room for a caretaker?" she asked. "My body and its caretaking are already squared away," I said. "We won't be needing space for either, at least not right away." "In that case, I have some Hayden Efficiency flats on my availability list," she said. "Would you like to see those?" "Are they worth my time?" I asked. Robinson shrugged. "Some Haydens like them," she said. "I think they're a little small, but then they're not designed for non-Haydens." "Are they close by?" "I've got a building of them on D Avenue in Southwest, right by Federal Center Metro," Robinson said. "The Department of Health and Human Services hires a lot of Haydens, so it's convenient housing for them." "All right," I said. "We might as well check them out." "We'll go there first," Robinson said, and spoke the address to the Cadillac. 5 minutes later, we were in front of a depressing slab of anonymous brutalist architecture. "This is lovely," I said dryly. "I think it used to be a government office building," Robinson said. "They converted it about 20 years ago. It was one of the first buildings redesigned with Haydens in mind." She nodded me into the lobby, which was clean and plain. A threep receptionist sat behind a desk. The threep was set to transmit ID data over the common channel. In my field of vision, its owner's data popped up above the threep's head. Genevieve Tourneau, 27 years old, native of Rockville, Maryland. Her public address for direct messages. "Hello," Robinson said to Genevieve, and showed her realtor's ID. "We're here to look at the vacancy on the 5th floor." Genevieve turned to me, and I realized belatedly that I didn't have my own personal data out on the common channel. Some Haydens found that rude. I quickly popped it up. She gave me a quick nod as if in acknowledgement, did a small double take, then recovered and turned her attention to Robinson. "Unit 503 is unlocked for the next 15 minutes, she said. "Thank you," Robinson said, and nodded over to me. "Hold on a second," I said. I turned back to Genevieve. "May I have guest access to the building channel, please?" Genevieve nodded to me, and I saw the channel marker pop up in my field of view. I connected to it. The lobby walls exploded into signage. Some of the notes were your basic corkboard notes, people looking for roommates or to sublet or asking after lost pets. At the moment, however, signs about the walkout and march dominated, signs reminding tenants to stay home, plans for walkout activities, requests to let Hayden's coming into town for the march crash in apartments with the sardonic notation that they would not need much space. Is everything okay? Robinson asked. It's fine, I said. I'm just taking in the posters on the wall. I read a few more, and then we walked over to the elevator bank and took the lift up to the 5th floor. Extra large elevators, Robinson noted as we rose. Hydraulic lift. Makes it easier to bring bodies up to the rooms. I thought these were all efficiency apartments, I said. No, not all of them, Robinson said. Some of them are full-size and have dedicated medical suites and caretaker rooms. Even the efficiencies have cradle hookups. They're supposed to be used on a temp basis, although I hear some Haydens are using them full-time now. And why is that? The elevator stopped and the doors opened. Abrams Kettering, which is a bill that has been passed that will cut government funding for Hayden's research and medical services. Adams Kettering, Robinson said. She walked out of the lift and down the hall. Assistance is getting slashed, so a lot of Haydens are downsizing. Those in townhomes are moving into smaller apartments. Those in apartments are moving into efficiencies. And some of those in efficiencies are taking on roommates. They're using the chargers in shifts. She glanced back to me, and her eyes flickered over my shiny, expensive threep, as if to say, not that you have to worry about that. It's been bad for the market, to be honest, but that's good for you as a potential renter. Now you have a lot more options, a lot cheaper. She stopped at apartment 503. That is, if this doesn't bowl you over. She opened the door and stood aside to let me pass through. Hayden Efficiency Apartment 503 was 2 meters by 3 meters and entirely bare, save for one built-in countertop. I stepped inside and immediately got claustrophobia. This isn't an apartment, it's a closet, I said, stepping forward to let Robinson in. I usually think of it as a bathroom, Robinson said, and pointed to a small tiled area which had a bank of electrical outlets and a couple of covered drains on the floor, flush with the tile. That would be the medical nook, by the way, right where the toilet would be. You're not exactly giving me the hard sell on this apartment, Ms. Robinson, I said. Well, to be fair, if all you're looking to do is park your threep every night, this isn't a bad choice, Robinson said. She pointed to the back right corner where the grooves and high voltage outlets were set into the wall, ready to receive inductive chargers. It's designed with standard threep cradles in mind, and the hardwired and wireless networks are fast and have deep throughput. The space has been designed with threeps in mind, so you don't have inessential things taking up space like closets or sinks. It's everything you need and absolutely nothing you don't. I hate it, I said. I thought you might, Robinson said. That's why I showed it to you first. Now that we have that out of the way, we can show you something that you might actually be interested in. I stared back at the spot of tile and thought about putting a human body there more or less permanently. So these kind of apartments are hot right now, I asked. They are, Robinson said. I don't usually deal with them. Not enough commission on them. They usually get rented through online want ads. But yes, right now, this kind of apartment is selling like hotcakes. Well, now I'm feeling a little depressed, I said. Well, you don't have to feel depressed, Robinson said. You're not going to live here. You're not going to have your body in here. But apparently some people are, I said. Yes, Robinson said. Maybe it's a blessing that the bodies don't notice. Ah, but that's not true, I said. We're locked in, but we're not unconscious. Trust me, Ms. Robinson, we notice where our bodies are. We notice it every moment we're awake. All right, so that's that. And like I said, one of the things that was that you can see from that particular thing is this is someone who is just trying to find an apartment, but an apartment that conforms to the reality of their life situation. You know, that there is a Android that they will use to get around in the real world, but there needs to be a space for the body, and that body will need to have a caretaker looking after it while, you know, the owner of the body is literally somewhere else in the world. And like I said, on a day-to-day basis, this is just the life they lead. For us, reading a book about the future, this is all new and this is all cool, right? But one of the things you have to really do as a writer, you really want to try to avoid, is making a big deal out of it. for the people who are living in there. One of the things that science fiction does really badly is the exposition trap, which is the "as you know, Bob." Where you go, as you know, Chris, we're here at Google, this worldwide technological company that was founded on the search engine thing. And you'd be like, oh, yes, absolutely. He knows that. He's been working here for 10 years. But in fiction, you see a lot of that because the audience doesn't know that. You have to give that information while at the same time respecting the fact that the characters that you are following and creating actually have all of this internalized. And so that's actually one of the defining challenges of writing science fiction, is to establish for the reader in the present time this awesome technology, while at the same time establishing for the characters who live in that future that this is their life, right? That this magnificent technology is no more exciting to them than a cell phone or a DVR, both of which, if you think about it, are pretty damn awesome. If I went back 25 years ago and told, the 25-year-old or the 20-year-old me about the cell phone, I would be like, "Are you a wizard?" You think about it. Remember Star Trek, the original Star Trek, where Kirk's got a communicator, and you're like, "Oh, so it only does voice? That's cute." Because it's like my phone here does voice, it does text, it takes pictures, it's basically, you can use it now as a tricorder. Quite frankly, if you've got one of those Google Gear things, it's got you can check your heart rate, you can see what's going on with your body, and so that communicator that Kirk had back in 1967, but supposedly the 23rd century, is just unbelievably quaint. So it's a fascinating thing about how the future catches up with you and how, as a science fiction writer, you deal with that. So what I'm trying to say is that when you read this, I hope what you get out of it is that this future is cool, but for them, it's just another day with a whole different set of problems. So we are at, I think, about the half-hour point, and which means that it's time to actually open up to questions from you folks here at Google. And I'll be happy to talk about Lock-In. I'll be happy to talk about the other books that I have. I'll be happy to talk about the TV series that are being developed out of a couple of my books, or the video game, my personal life, my website. You can ask anything. I will answer any question you have. Sometimes the answer will be, "I can't believe you asked that, leave and never come back." But as long as we're clear on that, then we're good. So let's go ahead. What?
You should mention your appearance.
Oh, and I also did want to mention, I do have an appearance tonight at Books Incorporated in Mountain View. I will be doing a reading there. I will not be doing this reading. I'll be doing an entirely different reading. So it will be an all-new show as far as it goes. If you're not doing anything tonight, come out. It starts at 7. Bring yourself and every single person you've ever met. So, all right, so first question.
Specifically in the Old Man's War series, something that I noticed that in your writing that I don't see in a lot of other places is that you portray people who are married or have been married for a long time, like long-standing relationships, as
Sure.
opposed to simply the chase portion. This seems, I don't want to say unique in fiction, but pretty rare. Mm-hmm. What brought you to do that, and why you and pretty much nobody else?
I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that particular premise, because, for example, in Forever War, there's a long-standing relationship between the protagonist and Mary Gay, who, interestingly enough, has a very near name of Joe Haldeman's wife, Gay. And so for me also, I mean, I've been married for a certain number of years, and going up on 20 years now. My wife is actually the template for Jane Sagan, right? So when you imagine Jane Sagan, imagine a woman who's about 5'10", straight brown hair, and will kill you if you get in her way, because that is my wife. She's just no nonsense, super awesome. And when it came to, he's like, I need to develop this badass character. Here's who I use. But the simple fact of the matter is that being married or being in relationships or having those long-term relationships are part of life, and that they are a significant portion of it. And everybody, or almost everybody, has those relationships. If you're not showing those, then you are not accurately reflecting life. And people are like, well, it's science fiction. You don't really have to accurately reflect life, which is a rotten lie. I mean, you can actually talk about the future, and you can speculate, and you can do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, the human creature is important. You know, we have all this technology now that's amazing. We'll have all this technology in the future. Humans are the same, you know, same build that they were 30,000 years ago, as far as it goes. So not having those things that humans do in your books, eventually it makes it feel artificial. It was also really important from the point of view of that particular character, John Perry, to establish some of what he was leaving behind. So much of who he was about who he was with that someone else, with his wife. And so, you know, it made leaving the earth that much more, because he was leaving, you know, that aspect of his life behind, or so he thought. And the other thing is that also, when you write a military science fiction book like I did, you know, with guns and lasers and explosions and you know aliens who want to eat you and all that sort of stuff, you have a really good opportunity to lose like 3/4 of your audience right away. If you start off with the scene, you know, where you know Hunky McChesty, you know, starts shooting you know the aliens with his big zapper gun and all that sort of stuff, and it's just blood. I wanted to show you know, I intentionally did the first scene of this action-adventure story with a guy missing his wife, because that is something anybody who's been in a relationship, can you think about losing your spouse or losing your longtime partner? It just rips your heart out. I mean, I'm getting kind of choked up thinking about it. But, you know, and so everybody has that moment that all of a sudden you're thrown in, you understand this guy. And you will follow his story because you know how much, you know, he misses his wife. So that was part of the reason to do it. So.
Hi, so I'm enjoying a lot of your books as audiobooks.
Yes.
And many of them are read by Will Wheaton. You guys make a great team. So with Lock-In, you're trying something a little bit different, where you actually have two versions of the audiobook, one read by Will and another one read by Amber. I forgot her last name, Benton. And I'm only a couple hours in, and so far I think if I hadn't known about it, it wouldn't even have occurred to me that the character could be anything other than male. So great job there.
Yeah.
But I think I still need a little bit more convincing to, like, once I'm finished with the Will Wheaton version, like, why should I listen to the other one?
Because it's
awesome.
awesome.
Talk about that.
Because it's awesome, because Amber did a fantastic job, and that Amber's way of doing Chris is different than Will's way of doing Chris. And both of those ways of doing Chris are slightly different than my way of doing Chris. You're right, when I originally wrote Chris, and in the book, Chris nowhere in there is gendered. And there's a reason for that. Part of it is because I wanted to see where people assigned Chris. What are your defaults as a human being? And the answer is, you find out by how you respond to Chris. My wife read Chris, and I did the thing because I automatically just sort of, when I'm talking about people in a non-specific way, just sort of automatically gender male, because that's what we do, and that's what I got brought up with. Literally, you know, the grammar, you know, the style guide for AP and, you know, Chicago, and everyone else said, you know, when in doubt, gender male. So I will still slip into that. And one time I slipped into that with Chris, and she was like, "What? No." Chris is emphatically female for her. For other people, Chris is emphatically male. What it comes down to is really what your own reading comes out of it. And I put that in there for the purpose of you know, making it interesting, making it kind of exciting. But I also didn't tell people about it. It's coming out now because people are like, thousands of people have read the book now, and they're like, "Hey, I was confused. I need guidance." And I'm not offering any sort of guidance. You know, when I wrote Chris, I specifically was like, not going to go there. Chris could be male. Chris could be female. Chris could be intersex. Chris could be trans. Started one, went the other, maybe went the other direction. Maybe Chris has decided that gender is not a thing to be considered at all, that it's not necessary in the construct that Chris exists in, because Chris is a threep to most people. And in the Agora, which is the online world that the Haydens are, you can be anybody who you want to be. So this essentialism towards gender is not necessarily a construct that works. in the same way as it works in the physical world. When it comes down to the readings that Will and Amber did, they both read from their gender essentialist point of view, and so it's really interesting for me to get the back and forth. And I say you should listen to Amber's, aside from her doing a fantastic job, to see how you respond to Chris making that switch. Does it change the story for you? Does it change the power dynamic between Chris and Van? Does it change the power dynamic between Chris and the other people that Chris associates with? And the answer is that will be up to you. And again, you don't want to hit people over the head with it. Like I said, I didn't mention it at all until other people started to mention it because I didn't want it to get in the way of the story. Well, I wanted it to be the thing that you noticed after you were done with the story. Like, that story was cool. What is Chris? Oh, shit. And then it kind of blows your mind and you go off from there. Yeah, listen to Amber and see how it changes the main character for you. There you go.
So as someone named Amber, it's a little bit awkward following that up.
You did a great job.
So I work with the social group here at Google, which, among other things, we run Google+.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that Google+ is trying to do is encourage really interesting, thoughtful discussions and conversations between people. Mm-hmm. And clearly, you've been doing this for years on your blog.
Right.
Clearly longer than Google+ has ever been doing it for.
Right.
So do you have any insights on what tools or key elements are necessary to promote deep, thoughtful, insightful discussion?
Absolutely, I do, and I'll send you information about my retainer fee. No, quite honestly, I think the first thing is that you have to have the dynamic on my website is basically there's someone there to lead the discussion, and that would be me saying, here's the topic under discussion. Here are my thoughts on this particular topic under discussion. The comment thread is open. Make your comments. People come in to make the comments. The person who is refereeing the conversation, that would be me, make sure the ground rules are set, that people understand the rules of the road in terms of the communication, and is able to direct people when they get off topic, remove the trolls when they show up, as they so often do, and basically make sure that the conversation that is being had is the conversation that is worth having on that particular topic. Now, how do you do that without going too far and just basically shutting down the conversation or not doing enough and just basically having it go discursive all over the place? And a lot of it comes down to practice, 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 which is the thing that most people don't have. The simple fact of the matter is I've been doing whatever for close to 16 years. 16 years on the 13th. Right? I've been doing this since 1998. It is paleo as far as the internet is concerned. I'm Cretaceous period. But because I've been doing it for a long time, those rhythms are established, and it goes there. Most people don't have the same amount of time to devote to it as I do, and they don't have the same sort of either practice or rhetorical training, because I also have a degree in philosophy and rhetoric and stuff like that, so that a lot of the detailed instructions about how to do this are not there. And I guess one of the things that maybe Google Plus or anybody else who wants to foster these sorts of things can do is make sure that the people who are leading the discussions have a robust set of tools to deal with discursiveness and so that they actually own the conversation. The other thing I would say would probably be useful is somewhere online, just say how to have how to comment on on Google Plus, how to have a conversation. And it's, in one sort of sense, it's like, wow, that seems insulting. But on the other hand, I have it up on my website. It's like how to be a good commenter. It's like, are you on topic? Are you doing what I call the libertarian dismount, which is the thing where I'm sorry, you're clearly confused about this. The libertarian dismount would be like we're talking about same-sex marriage, and someone goes, well, that's just because, frankly, the state shouldn't be involved in the marriage process at all. And that's fascinating, but that's not the topic. You're dragging this topic over to the thing you want to talk about, which is whether or not the state should be involved with marriage at all, which is not the topic of how do we deal with the emerging consensus about same-sex marriage. And so that sort of dismount into, I'm uncomfortable with this topic, so I really want to talk about this, and I'm going to make you all talk about that, is something you don't want. Knowing when to quit, knowing when to, have the final word, knowing when to walk away. These are all things that actually have to be learned. And some people don't want to learn them. Some people do want to be trolls, or some people don't think that their point of view is ever possibly wrong. They don't even mean it in a malicious way. They just don't understand why, through the process of continually talking and never shutting up, you don't eventually come around to their point of view. Yeah, who knew that would happen out on the internet, where you don't actually have that face-to-face communication? So a lot of that really will come down to you give the people the tools. You do as much as you can do. But sooner or later, it's the whole thing of leading horse to water. Sooner or later, the horse either has to drink or not. And I would say give as many tools as it can to allow people to have those robust conversations. Highlight when you and where you see the robust conversations. If you go to Metafilter, they'll have Matt Howey has that list on the side of these are really cool conversations that we're having at Metafilter. And those are perfect examples. And you just train people over the course of time. It's not something that's going to immediately happen. It has to happen over the space of years and years and years. And the problem is that then you always have new people coming in. There's an old term from the Usenet days the September that never ends, which was when every year new kids would come to colleges and they would get on the Usenet for the first time, and then everyone had to go, it's time to train them how to use it. And then AOL, bless its heart, dumped all its 20 million people on the internet all at once, and it was just September everywhere. And so you have a continual September going on with any social media, whether it's Google Plus or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Everybody sooner or later cycles through, and you just have to accept that that's part of the deal as well. That's what I think, and I'll be sending you a bill.
Hey, another question about audiobooks. I'm kind of interested in how the audiobook production process ties into writing, if at all. Does it just come that you finish a book, throw it over the wall to Will Wheaton, or is it something more involved? Do you think about that while you're producing? Does this affect your choice of first versus third person at all?
I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the image of me checking things over Will Wheaton's wall. Will! Actually, I will give an example of something that I do less now because I know that audio is important to a large segment of my audience, which is dialogue tags. Let's go down to the store, Chris said. All right, Christine said. Well, make sure that we get Coca-Cola, Chris said. And the thing is when you're writing that, the he said, she said, he said, your brain filters it out. Because enough of it, and you're like, yeah. The dialogue tag is there almost in a subliminal way to let you know who is talking. So in a printed medium, the fact that I put said at the end of everything or doesn't really affect things. In audiobook, it gets astoundingly monotonous. And I didn't, and people started saying this to me once Will's versions of stuff of mine took off, and they're like, "You use said a lot." I'm like, "No, I don't really." And then I was listening to Red Shirts, and there was a part in chapter 2. It's like, blah blah blah, Dahl said, blah 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 blah, Hampson said, and I'm just like, who is this idiot? Who is the idiot who wrote this crap? I need to talk to him. Because what works in one medium doesn't necessarily work in another medium. So for lock-in, because I knew that it was going to be done in audio, I took out, I would say, probably 30 to 40% of the dialogue tags. Where if it's just like two characters having a conversation, it'd be Chris said, John said. And then next time I go to Chris, it doesn't have a dialogue tag because that is the logical place for that to be going. And so in that respect, yes, absolutely, that is one example of how my writing has accommodated this other medium. Now, whether it's enough for people who really dislike the fact that I use that dialogue tag, we'll have to see. But yeah, you are aware no matter what you're doing, where your audience is and what their expectations are. And to the extent that it doesn't actually compromise your story or compromise what it is that you want to do, you want to accommodate that because you want them to buy your stuff so you can make your mortgage payment. And so frankly, I was happy to do that and to incorporate that in. And there are other things that probably I do now that I'm not aware of. But since I've been listening to Will and Amber and William Dufree, who does the Old Man's War stuff, and Tavia Gilbert, who did Zoe's Tale, listening to them do my stories, you definitely soak that in and you find out new things about yourself as a writer because of it. So, yes. Come on down.
You've talked online before about that you deliberately make your novels very approachable to readers, and it's definitely something I've noticed. And
yeah.
You're sort of the author I recommend to non-science fiction fans to kind of get into science fiction. Do you think science fiction needs to do more of that and needs to grow beyond its kind of genre roots? And where is that line kind of blurring at the moment between things that sit in the science fiction section of the bookstore versus a general novel?
I do think science fiction could do with some more sort of gateway science fiction. I'm torn because in one sort of sense, there is not a huge amount of gateway science fiction out there, which is great for me because I write it. So I end up being recommended a lot. It was like, what should I read? I don't read a lot of science fiction. Oh, Scalzi. Anybody else? No? So that's awesome. On the other hand, it's not necessarily very good for the genre. The thing about it is that if it has to be working on all sorts of levels. You need somebody. You need people like me who are writing the gateway fiction. It's just kind of going, hey, just one hit. It'll be fine. And the next thing you know. And then you need people who are doing the next level of science fiction, where the water is a little deeper, that things are a little more complex. And then eventually you lead them down the path that takes them to Charlie Stross and China Mieville, right? And then once they're there, they're trapped. Right? They will never escape that hole. The Venus flytrap of science fiction and fantasy. But I think it needs to operate on all those levels. You can't just have everything be open and accessible and fun, because then the people who really dyed-in-the-wool, heavy science fiction fans are just going to sit there and roll their eyes. There are people who won't read me because they're like, Scalzi, take off the training wheels, and that's perfectly reasonable. It's like I'm not writing for them, but there are other people who, if I tried to hand my mother-in-law, who I love and who reads Julie Garwood and Nora Roberts, hand her Charlie Stross or hand her China Mieville, both of whom are writers that I think are fabulous and have created some of the best science fiction work of the last, of the new century. She would read for maybe about 5 pages, and she's like, and she would set it down and never, do that again. You have to have all that working on all levels if the field is going to be healthy. So I do think we need more people doing stuff like me. We need more people doing stuff like Charlie, and more people doing stuff like Cameron Hurley, who is doing some fantasy right now, which is very complex. We need more people like her doing stuff like that. Ann Leckie, who just won every single award imaginable for ancillary justice. We need more of people like her who are taking space opera and just basically breaking it apart and putting it back together again in new formats. We need more of everything is basically my feeling about science fiction and fantasy. So hopefully we're in the place where we'll get some more of that.
So I love the Old Man's War universe.
Thank you.
And I look forward to more books in that genre. But how, as an author, do you decide when to continue expanding the universe and when you kind of don't have anything new to say?
That's actually a really good question, because there's that tension. Because Old Man's War is very successful. You've done very well for me, thank you. I will sit in my hot tub in honor of you. But we did just buy a hot tub, by the way. And it's ridiculous. It is a ridiculous hot tub. I was telling them earlier, it's a hot tub. It's like an RV of hot tubs. It's just like it seats 7. It's got you can have a TV in it. You can it has chilled drinks, all this sort of stuff. And it's the thing that the old story: if you give a mouse a cookie, it's going to want a glass of milk. If you get yourself a hot tub, you're going to want a gazebo for the hot tub. It's a money pit. So I'm very excited about the hot tub. So please buy more books. is what I'm trying to say. But no, here's the tension. On one hand, I could quite literally write an old man's war book and then something else and then another old man's war book and something else and another old man's war book until the cows come home. And a lot of people would buy them. And they would get to the point where they're like, oh, you know, Old Man's War 17, whatever it is. And they'd be like, oh, you know, it's not as good as they were when he started out. He kind of, you know, he's just kind of, but I guess it's okay, you know. And I don't want to be that guy. For one thing, because if I'm bored writing, which I would get bored writing if I just kept hacking them out, you're going to be bored reading. And you might buy them out of habit, but I don't want you to buy them out of habit. I want you to buy them because you're like, holy crap, this is, you know, this is out, this is new, and I need it now. I want you to actually want to get it as opposed to feel sort of a moral obligation, kind of the way you felt about watching episode 3 of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. It's like, I've invested this much time, off we go. Are you Vader yet? You know what I mean? You were there, yeah. And I don't want that. I want you to actually be excited about every new episode, and sometimes that means actually stepping away. Like I did an arc that started with Old Man's War and ended with Last Colony and Zoe's Tale. It told the story of John Perry and his family, right? That was a complete arc. And then when that was done, I took 5 years off of the Old Man's War series. And part of the reason for that was I didn't know where else to go with it. I mean, their story was told. I put the universe in a precarious position, but I didn't know what that meant. And so I went off and did other things while it was rolling around in my brain. And then I became interested right around the same time that you know, the folks at Tor were like, we would like to do this episodic project where we do everything you know, electronically in a serial fashion. I was like, well, interestingly enough, I was thinking of doing a series of short stories with these characters. Why don't we combine those together? And that's how that showed up. The second Human Division book, which I'm working on right now, which will be out next year, is going to be kind of in the same sort of boat of things. But ultimately, what's going to happen with that is when those two books are done, I will probably step away from the Old Man's War universe again, because I got to figure out what's going to happen next. And I would rather take the time to figure out what's happening next than to just, again, hack it out. The good news is that apparently you guys do buy my other books. You know, this actually just landed on the New York Times hardcover bestseller list, so I'm like, yes! I was like, what a relief. But so it seems like you guys are willing to let me do other things, which is the other trap. Because sooner, you know, the question becomes: do people love you? This is the author neurotic thing. Do they love me for me, or do they love me for my series? Right? Like if I write something else, does that something else become like in the band that goes, "This is the title track of our new album," and everybody goes out to go pee, right? You know, play the hits, which would be the Old Man's War series. So fortunately, it seems like you're willing to let me do other things, and I really appreciate that. But it is a consideration. You know, I do have a mortgage to pay. I do have a daughter to go, who is going to go through college one day. You know, I want to retire one day. You know, all this sort of stuff. I have a hot tub. So, you know, all of these things, you know, conspire to what things are going to be commercial and what things are going to work. But you know, for me, I do have the luxury of saying, I'll get back to it when I get back to it. So I might, after the end of this next book, get back to the Old Man's War 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, wherever. But when I get back to it, it will be because I want to be there, as opposed to I feel like I have to be there. And I think this should be the last question, and then we'll get to the signing stuff.
Can you share details of your non-book projects that you're working on?
Non-book projects?
Uh-huh.
TV? You want to know about the TV?
Yeah.
Okay, I have 2 TV projects. One is Old Man's War, which is going to be at Sci-Fi, and you know, which apparently fills a lot of people with terror. They're like, Sci-Fi, they do wrestling. They don't do science fiction. No, they actually have started doing science fiction again. They got the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey, The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Yeah, right? Yeah. I'm excited about it too, sir. And then, of course, my book series as well. So they seem to be going all in about actually living up to their network name. So that's going to be positive. Red Shirts has been optioned by FX as a mini-series, which is kind of cool because they've been doing really well with the mini-series. They've just got nominated for, and I think have won quite a few Emmys for their Fargo series as an example of that. And those are at the writing stage right now. I've met with the writers from the Old Man's War series, which is also another reason why I'm okay to step back, because in the meantime, while I'm thinking about where it goes next, you'll have these guys, dribbling out new episodes of whatever's going on in the Old Man's War world, and that will be kind of fun. And it's fascinating because it's a completely different medium. You understand when you go in that the book is not going to be the TV series, and the TV series is not going to be the book, and the changes that they have to make because the storytelling is different, the fact that they actually have to work within certain budgetary constraints, and so on and so forth, and just the way that all works. And people are like, "Are you worried about them changing your books?" And I'm like, "No, because they're not going to change the books. The books are over here. They will always remain the same. I own the copyright on those. Ain't changing, right?" But what they do will be kind of interesting. Now, if they're successful, it doesn't matter because what they do to the series in some sort of way, because the books will take off. Like, you may have heard of this guy, George Martin, right? He's got this little series on HBO called Game of Thrones. His books are just this huge clot at the top of the bestseller lists in paperback. It's like every month in and out, you've got all like 4 out of the 6 books, I think there's 6. How many books now? 5? 5. You guys would know. 4 out of the 5, there's always, right up there at the top. And you sort of, and the thing is that the fact that they can just wait till, season 6 or whatever, or season 5 comes out, doesn't stop the books from selling. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, because then I will take this hot tub that I just bought and I will fill it full of money. I'll just sit there and rub the money on me. Just like that. So that will be really positive. So that's one thing. I'm also working on a video game called Midnight Star with Industrial Toys, which is their tablet. It's a first-person shooter that's designed for tablets, so you can play a first-person shooter literally with one hand. So one hand holding the tablet, the other one killing all the aliens and stuff like that. One of the principals of Industrial Toys is Alex Seropian, who co-founded Bungie and co-created Halo. So when he called me up and was like, "Hey, would you like to do this video game with me?" I was like, "That seems an acceptable risk." So that will actually hopefully be out in the next couple of months, and I've seen it and I've played it, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. And that's what I'm going to say about that. Well, we are at the 2 o'clock hour, and what I will do now is I will go to the back of the room, and I will be happily sign your books. Thank you all for coming and spending your free hour with me.